if these guys are even, I think that it's an obvious choice if you're Nick Saban that you got to at least make the attempt to hire Lebby. You have to try to make that attempt to hire Jeff Lebby. And the reason why you have to do that is because you have an opportunity to cut off one of the legs of a team that as early as next season, 2024 season, will be a member of the SEC, competing for that championship and therefore a spot in the playoff. Let's go! Welcome back to the Hall of Fame College Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Watkins, and if you love college football, you are definitely in the right place. So before you forget, smash that red subscriber button, like our videos, and don't forget to ring the bell so you don't miss one moment of the Hall of Fame College Football Podcast. Folks, I'm going to go ahead and I'm hoping that this is the last time I really talk about this. The only other way would be if the dreaded thing happens, which is Jeff Lebby leaving the Oklahoma Sooner football program as its offensive coordinator to take the same position with Nick Saban's Alabama Crimson Tide. Now, there's been a lot of discussion about this. There has been a lot of folks that, as far as Sooner fans are concerned, that do not like the conversation. They think it's just rumor and BS and that it'll never happen. It's been hanging around for way too long, and there's way too many signs that Nick Saban wants it to happen to really take that tack with it as far as I'm concerned as a content creator. Now, what I will say is this. I believe, and I want to believe that Jeff Lebby would not turn his back on his own alma mater, as I said the other day, and do what you would probably call the unthinkable, which is, betray his school. Because in a lot of ways it would betray the school, and it would betray Venables. It would betray all the guys that he was teammates with when he was an Oklahoma Sooner himself in the early 2000s. But here's the problem, and here's the deal with me. There's a lot of reasons that you have to, first off, expect that this is a possibility, okay? And not the least of which, to me, is the fact that this would be, albeit very treacherous of a move by Nick Saban, a damn smart move by Nick Saban. And what I mean by that is, even if the latest that I've heard is, any number of guys like Dan Mullen, Joe Brady, and there's been some other names, but of course with Jeff Lebby being in that top three, I've heard that Lebby, I still, even in the last 2 days, have heard that Lebby is number one on the list. Okay. But let's just assume, let's take Dan Mullen out of the equation. Okay. Let's just assume that Nick doesn't want to add that weirdness to his locker room. Okay. So let's say it's just Brady and Lebby that he's, thinking of choosing between. What the point I'm going to make here is that even if it's close, if Lebby is close to Joe Brady, which I would think that he clearly is, he is certainly one of the more sought after coordinators in college football. One of the highest respected. He's worked with some pretty amazing coaches as far as learning offense from them. You know, Lane Kiffin before he got to Oklahoma, and before that, his father-in-law is one of the, you know, most respected offensive minds probably in the last 20, 30 years in Art Briles. Okay. Now, Brady has also had his own, he's had a pretty good career himself, not as much in the NFL, but he was the architect of one of the greatest single season offenses in the history of certainly the playoff, but even in, you know, modern college football history, which was the Joe Burrow LSU Tigers that won the national championship undefeated. Now, what I'm getting at is if these two guys are, let's say you weigh them out fairly evenly. To me, I would still say that on the surface of it right now, that Lebby is probably a little elevated in comparison to Brady because he hasn't been in college football for a few years, right? But let's just say they are even. If they are, and I'm Saban, because and thinking of Saban as I want to win all the time, and I believe that he at least has some level of paranoia over the last couple of years where they did not win the national championship. This season, they didn't even get into the playoff, losing 2 games by total of 1 point. A lot of people were blaming Bill O'Brien on this. Their defense wasn't very good. But, you know, they were scoring 40 points. But there was I don't know of a whole lot of Bama fans that are not happy that he's leaving. Yeah. So if these guys are even, I think that it's an obvious choice if you're Nick Saban that you got to at least make the attempt to hire Lebby. And all things being considered, he has done that. You have to try to make that attempt to hire Jeff Lebby. And the reason why you have to do that is because you have an opportunity to cut off one of the legs of a team that as early as next season, 2024 season, will be a member of the SEC, competing for that championship and therefore a spot in the playoff, which, albeit the fact that they will have the 12 team on in 2024, but this is a team that's going to be in the way of Alabama. And before anybody, this is something that the Outlaw College Football has disagreed with me vehemently on. And it's because he's not really, this is not, what I'm saying is not this. I'm not going to sit there and tell you that Nick Saban is, quote, afraid of Brent Venables and his 6-7 Oklahoma Sooners right now. First time head coach, you know, he keeps, Outlaw said, I think you OU fans are out of touch with reality. And the only thing that I'm going to say to that is that is not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about today. I'm not talking about tomorrow. I'm not talking about this season on who I believe is going to have a better football team in 2023. I think that overall, you would have to guess that more than likely, no matter who is the offensive coordinator in Tuscaloosa, they're going to be ranked higher. They're probably going to be a better football team. You just have to expect that. Okay. This is still a young Oklahoma football team, right? But let's talk about this for a second, though. And let me start off with a timeline here. And Lebby was identified as a candidate a few weeks ago before they even fired or decided to part ways with Bill O'Brien. Right away, he pretty much said that he wasn't interested in the position. And I think that the discussion had been broached between him and Saban. They both have the same agent, as does Brent Venables and Jimmy Sexton. So it looked like you were dodging that bullet. Well, lo and behold, the job officially becomes open. And Pete Thamel of ESPN is on the Paul Feinbaum show and identifies Lebby as the number one candidate. So this restirs the pot. I think that Jeff has repeatedly said that he's not interested, at least privately. He hasn't done it super publicly. He said things that make you think that he's not, like, why would I want to leave Oklahoma? He's talked about the fact that he loves the guys that he's brought in on recruiting. He loves the direction that this program is heading in. I know that he was able to get Brent Venables to agree to allow him to be a bit more aggressive on the offensive side. So, it looked as if, that it was going to be good, but it just keeps coming up, Thamel and on Feinbaum's show thinking that he's the number one on his list. Then you have Michael Hawkins, who is a legacy recruit quarterback from Frisco Emerson down in Texas. And he had actually transferred over from Allen High School, which is fairly surprising, but he is a fringe 5-star quarterback. His dad played and was part of the same recruiting class as Jeff Lebby in 2002 at Oklahoma. So this is a legacy commitment, or a guy that they expected to be a slam dunk on signing day to come to Oklahoma, or commit to Oklahoma anyway. He, a few days before, I believe it was on Tuesday, had tweeted out that he wanted to push back his commitment day. Now, that tweet has since been deleted, but what I would tell you is that signaled that Jeff Lebby was more than likely had been honest with the family, probably, in saying, or maybe his dad was just saying, well, not too sure that Jeff Lebby's going to be there. His father and Jeff are like best friends. Again, they were part of the same recruiting class. So it's not necessarily just that, but it does signal that there is some uncertainty in Norman because of the fact that you would figure with a legacy guy, his dad played there, his dad's best friend is the offensive coordinator there. 2 and 2 makes 4. He should be in Oklahoma. When you push back your commitment date, that automatically made everybody assume, well, maybe Lebby is interested. I bring all that up, and to kind of go through, I wanted to bring that timeline into it is because all of these times there's been plenty of opportunity for Lebby to come out and emphatically say, we're not going anywhere. Okay. And part of this could be, he could be, jockeying for some more money. I do believe that he's got to have some level of, but I do believe he does have to have some level of interest in this because of all the things when of everybody that you probably would have to stop and listen to, Nick Saban's going to be that guy. A lot of people have also said, if you take this job, maybe you become, and this is something that the Outlaw brought up, one of these two coordinators may very well become coach in waiting, which is what they do, trying to lock you in to coming in there because they think Saban is going to retire here in the next few years. He is in his 70s now, 71 years old. The people that have said that they don't think that he might be losing it, he lost 2 games this season by 2 total points. So Miss me with that one. Okay. And I could definitely see him. Coach Roybal said, at one point he was saying that he might coach into his 80s or until he died. I could see that too. I don't think Miss Terry wants him just hanging around the house all the time. And I don't think he wants to, right? I think that this is what he loves to do. And the fact that he is still ranting and raving up and down that sideline tells you that he's still very passionate about being the head football coach at Alabama. Okay. Now, as I said a minute ago, I believe that this is one of the few people that you have to listen to. All right. You have to. Even if you are among the most loyal to your alma mater, you want to do this. Yeah, I think this is something you have to listen to. And I don't necessarily even think it's about money. I'm sure that Alabama might be able to pay more. It wouldn't be significantly more than what Oklahoma could afford to pay. And I don't know that they can necessarily afford more anyway. I think that Oklahoma can afford it fine. The bottom line comes to this. Is Lebby going to be a candidate for that position if he were to say go and become the offensive coordinator there at Alabama, right? Is Jeff Lebby, would taking this position at Alabama as offensive coordinator make him a more viable candidate for a head coaching job, and in particular, the head coaching job at Alabama? Well, if we're talking Alabama, I don't think so. I don't believe that they are going to hire a first-time head coach at Alabama when Nick Saban leaves. I don't think it's possible that that's going to happen. Okay. I just don't see it. And the reason for that is there are plenty of candidates out there that have been successful head coaches that have ties to Alabama in some way or ties to Nick Saban in some way that would, be a good candidate for it. Number one on that list would probably be Lane Kiffin. And if not, maybe 1A, because maybe Dabo Swinney would be the other guy, because Alabama being his alma mater, he won a national title in college as a receiver at Alabama. But those two guys are the first that come to my mind. I don't see Kirby Smart leaving necessarily, and he would have to have a precipitous free fall for them to ever think of firing him at Georgia, which is his alma mater. But I do not think for any 1 second that they're going to hire a first-time head coach. So if he were to take that position, does he get that job? No, I don't think so. I don't know who they're going to – if Jeremy Fowler becomes defensive coordinator, as a lot of people are expecting he will, does he get a second chance as a head coach? Possibly, right? I think it's something that he's going to have to prove to some people that he's not going to do stupid things like what he did that got him fired at Tennessee, which a lot of is just crazy improprieties. But I wonder where he learned that from. It's not a reason for Lebby to go. Now, would taking this position make Jeff Lebby more valuable as an option to become a head coach? Absolutely. Around the country, I believe so. I think that much like Lane Kiffin, though, he ends up getting maybe a better job than FAU. I think more than he gets a better job than that. But I could definitely see him getting a job in the Big 12, or maybe an Ole Miss if Lane Kiffin were to become head coach at Alabama once Saban leaves, whatever. And I just feel like, there's a couple of different jobs that you could see him taking as his first head coaching position. It won't be Alabama, but I do believe it would obviously make him more of a viable candidate. Correct? Right? So we can take that out of it. I mean, obviously that's big, but I also believe that if he's already that, he is already a viable candidate for a head coaching position. And I think that that's really what I would expect unless he were to take this job, that's the only way I expect him to leave the coordinator position at Oklahoma, is because he's got a head coaching job, and which he's already turned some down, right? He could have been a head coach at a few places. I think he's waiting for at least a upper tier head coaching job. It may not be an elite one. I think he's going to get an upper tier one. I could see him being Florida head coach. They call Billy Napier Group of Five Billy. So, and in view of the fact of everything that happened with the Jaden Rashada deal, I don't know that I see Billy hanging around for very long, right? I could see a couple of positions at in the ACC that that would be something that he might look at. Definitely in the Big 12, where he's from. I could see Oklahoma. But I mean, a lot of stuff would have to happen, right? Now, the bottom line is this when it comes to Saban's interest in Jeff Lebby. And my feeling is that you have to go with Lebby if you can do it. And the reason is this. You go back and you look at two of the more bitter losses in Nick Saban's career came to Clemson, national title game. I know that he's beaten Clemson twice in the playoffs as well, once for the national title. Okay. But I don't care. When you lose twice to a program, and more specifically, it wasn't just Clemson, it was that nasty, nasty defense of Brent Venables at Clemson. Obviously, in that second one, Trevor Lawrence had 350 passing yards and 3 touchdowns, but the Clemson defense held Alabama to 16 points. 16 points. What I would tell you is this. Nick Saban doesn't forget this. There is not a single coach, especially at that level, but at any level, that forgets those big, hard losses that they take and why they took them. That first time around in the 2017 game, they lost 35-31. Those are heartbreakers. But when you get embarrassed in the national championship game, 44-16, and to a freshman, that tells you that he remembers. I'll guarantee you, he remembers everything that they weren't as good as Clemson was. And let me tell you, defensively, they got shut down. Now, why do I bring that up? Because now Brent Venables, albeit as a head coach, is first and foremost building what they had built at Clemson. He already, in 2 recruiting cycles, has been top 10 in both of them. They're number 5 this time around. Okay, number 5, which is the highest in the 247 era for Oklahoma ever. Heavy on that in that class is defensive talent. But what's being built is the defense like what you would have expected to see from Venables at Clemson and in the early part of his career at Oklahoma. Okay. So on top of that, you probably have a better offense in Jeff Lebby, or with Jeff Lebby's offense, than what you had at Clemson either year. Already, even with a guy that nobody's going to mistake for Caleb Williams playing quarterback in Dillon Gabriel, they were top 15 in the country, coming in at number 13 on offense. He has just recruited the Gatorade National High School Player of the Year in Jackson Arnold, who is according to On3, is the number 4 or the number 6 recruit in the country. He is top 15 by 247 in the country. Again, Gatorade named him National Player of the Year coming out of high school. This is an amazing quarterback you got coming in. If you get Michael Hawkins, And he is a fringe 5-star guy. By the end of the year, they expect that he's going to be a 5-star guy. You're talking about a guy that now has a pipeline for 5-star quarterbacks and a head coach that's bringing in 5-star talent on the defensive thing, and they're coming into your conference a year from now. Now, before anybody sits there and says, like I said earlier, oh, well, Saban isn't afraid of a 6-7 Oklahoma team with a first-time head coach. That's outlandish. And Outlaw, I think you guys are getting a little out of touch with the reality here, and I get it. That is not what I'm saying. But if you are Nick Saban, and this is just the bottom line with me, if you're Nick Saban, don't tell me this is a guy that thinks about every detail. Every detail. Coach Roybal talked a couple of weeks ago about they go to a bowl game, they literally walk through everything. They go take a bus to the stadium and count the number of steps to their locker room after they get off the bus. This is how detailed things are. He doesn't forget details. And believe me, he remembers the kind of defenses that he had to deal with from Brent Venables in those playoffs. And in fact, they played each other 4 times in the playoffs. Okay? Yes, he won twice. Clemson won twice. Okay? I'm not saying that he's afraid of Brent Venables. That's not what I'm telling you. What I'm telling you is that he knows what a pain in the ass it is to deal with a Brent Venables defense, particularly when you have an offense like what Oklahoma has in store coming up in the next few years with a guy like Jackson Arnold, possibly Michael Hawkins, and a Jeff Lebby run offense. Okay? It doesn't even just end at quarterbacks. He's bringing in amazing talent at the receiver position. He brought in 2 of the top level freaking running backs in the country from this year, and he got Gavin Sawchuk, and he got 2 badasses from last year too. That are probably, and then his offense featured Eric Gray this season. He had his best season in college. He's going to be one of the first running backs taken in the draft in a few months. Okay. So the bottom line is this. It has nothing to do with Saban being afraid. He's not afraid of anybody. Is there some paranoia going on? Absolutely. And that has been signaled over the last few years anyway. Nick Saban loves to tell you everything that's wrong with college football. If you're reading between the lines, it's what he doesn't like that he feels like puts his program at a disadvantage. For instance, the NIL. He didn't like it. He doesn't like it. He wanted to make sure that the NCAA, which has no teeth, put some stuff in place to limit what a school can do with the NIL stuff. You're not supposed to be able to entice players with the NIL. That doesn't mean it doesn't happen, and it does happen, right? If he really cared, he would have pushed for, if he really cared about the good of the game and not just his program, he would have been pushing for that the schools have control of their own NIL budget. That way it could all be tracked, and then you could actually have some level of control over it at commissioner level, conference level, whatever, because if they really want any kind of parity, which they don't, but if they did, that's what they would be doing. Now, he didn't want enticement though. He wants them to not be able to entice like that, because that's what he's always done the best and the most quiet. If you remember back to this time last year when he was, I said this yesterday, and this is another thing that the Outlaw doesn't like, but I said he kind of tossed Jimbo under the bus there, talking to his own boosters, and he also tossed Deion Sanders under that same bus, talking about them buying their classes. How Coach Prime had bought Travis Hunter, and that Jimbo bought his entire class, right? Well, he forgot to tell everybody that so did he. But he was particularly not very happy about the fact that Jimbo had just netted himself the number one rated recruiting class in the history of rating them. Okay. What happened this year? Alabama does it. They beat that one, right? So don't get me wrong. He's still doing these things. But this is what I'm saying is that he is about control and about keeping control of that throne that he sits on with his 7 national championships. And I get that. And again, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that he's afraid per se of Oklahoma, because Oklahoma is not on their level yet. But to think that next year, not only do you have Oklahoma, but Texas coming in that are recruiting right there in the top 5 with you at Alabama, that have coaches that you respect because he respects Steve Sarkisian for the way that he's run his offense as one of his boys, right? And then you respect Brent Venables for the fact that his defense has dominated you before in a national setting on the biggest stage there was and made your team look terrible. He knows what can happen. So while he may not be afraid today, these are landmines that this is not something he is not okay with not being the national champion or in the playoff and in that. And believe me, with the 12-team playoff, I suspect that they'll be back in another couple of playoffs. You know, they may be back in it this year while it's still 4. All I'm getting at is you already have a lot of landmines that I mean, they're always chasing him. But he's got a long memory, and all coaches do. Okay? All coaches do. So that's something to think about. And this is why I say it would be catastrophic for Oklahoma to lose Jeff Lebby. Because if you lose Jeff Lebby, let's say he was to take this job right now, theoretically, you could lose 3 quarterbacks with that move. 3. And including the guy that everybody is expecting to start this past season, that started last season, Dylan Gabriel. You could lose him too. You may not. You may not. But I would almost bet that Jackson Arnold goes. I don't know that for sure either, but he's at Oklahoma because of Jeff Lebby. We know that Michael Hawkins coming to Oklahoma at least partly has, at least partly is dependent upon Lebby being here. All right. And I mean, that's not even, forget the quarterback. There's a lot of positions that there's guys that were already planning that they came because of Lebby as well. As many guys that came on defense because of Brent Venables and Todd Bates and their staff. There's just as everybody that came on offense, that came for the offense, came for Jeff Lebby as well. This could hurt you in many, many ways. And 1 year from going into the SEC, you cannot afford this if you're Oklahoma. That's why I've been saying that. This is not about being disrespectful towards Nick Saban. Not. I didn't say he's afraid of anything. I don't believe that he's afraid of a thing. What I do believe is that he is a paranoid coach, and coaches are that. This is what they do. And you're talking about one of the most detailed coaches in the history of football who, I mean, he's the GOAT. And why is that? Because like his mentor, Bill Belichick, they don't miss anything. Every detail matters. Every detail matters. How many steps it is from the bus to the locker room matters to these guys. So you can easily see how, if given the opportunity with Joe Brady and Jeff Lebby, if they're anywhere close, you're going to pick Jeff Lebby and you're going to really go hard at it. And according to a lot of people, no is not an answer that he's taking right now on Jeff Lebby. And Jeff hasn't come out and said, I'm not going. Coach Saban, I'm not coming. He hasn't done it. He hadn't done it. He said things like, oh, why would I leave? It says Oklahoma. Lincoln said, I'm the head coach at Oklahoma last year. till he wasn't. You just don't know what could happen. And in view of the fact that we're talking about 1 year away from going into the SEC, he literally has an opportunity. If you're Nick Saban and you get Jeff Lebby, you have the opportunity of torpedoing Brent Venables' head coaching career. Think about it. At 123 out of 130 FBS teams, that was the rank of the defense this past season. Without that number 13 offense, 6 and 7 might be 3 and 10. Very easily could have been 3 and 10. Okay. I believe that the defense is going to be considerably better with the transfer guys that they got in, and some of these kids that they got in the recruiting class for this 2023 class are probably going to be ready to rock and roll right away. I think Makari Vickers is. I mean, we didn't even bring up Peyton Bowen, one of the top 2 safeties in the country. He's probably going to play early. You've got the McCullough brothers coming in. One of them as a transfer who played very well as a freshman. You expect that he's going to do well. PJ Adebawari will definitely. I suspect he starts. Yeah, I think they're better. Do I think that they're going to be good enough that you don't need a good offense and a decent quarterback? No. We saw what happens in the Red River game when you don't have a decent quarterback. And if you were to, if the worst of the worst that happened and Dylan Gabriel left too, if Jackson left and Dylan left, what do you got? What do you got left? Transfer season is pretty much over with. The only thing you're going to get after the spring is leftover guys that didn't win the job somewhere else. Bad deal. And so literally you could torpedo a guy that likely could rival you in a couple of years down the line. I think that they're 2 years away from being, or a year at least away from being a real contender for the CFP. Okay? I do. And also, we're not sure what it's going to look like when you go to a 12-team playoff. But all I'm going to say is this. I do not put it past Nick Saban to try to do that. I don't. And honestly, I wouldn't think as much of him if he wasn't doing that. That was the other thing. This is not being disrespectful towards Nick Saban. In fact, respectfully, I say that that's what he would do. Because he's that dude. He wants to win that bad. I'm not bad-mouthing him. You take out the guys. I mean, this is what the sport is. You do your best to get these guys fired that are your rivals. It's a survival game. Okay? I mean, would you have ever thought that Dabo Swinney would have gone with a Lincoln Riley guy? No. That's not what he wanted to do. He's a pro style offense, dude. He went with Lincoln's little brother. You know? The air raid. It's the game is about surviving and winning, and you do what you got to do. And to me, it would Nick Saban would be losing a step if he wasn't even thinking in that way, that he could hurt Oklahoma and in the same process help himself. That's all I got to say about that, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments. I don't think I'm going to bring this back up anymore. There really isn't any news on whether he's going or not going, and that's not even what this video was supposed to be about. I absolutely do not put it past Nick Saban to try to sabotage a team that he's going to have to deal with in the SEC a year from now. That's all there is to it. Let me know what you think in the comments. Like, subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.